When my husband's mistress showed up at my workplace, parading her baby bump in front of everyone, she thought she had already won. But what she got in return wasn't what she expected. My name is Emily, I'm 32, and I work as a marketing manager in Chicago. I've always believed in building a strong career and a loving home, and for a long time, I thought I had both. My husband, Daniel, is 34 and an architect. He was the man I thought I'd grow old with. He was charming, ambitious, and he always seemed so proud to introduce me as his wife. From the outside, our life looked picture perfect. We had a small but beautiful house in the suburbs, the kind of place with a neat lawn, friendly neighbors, and weekends spent grilling in the backyard. We would talk about having kids, plan trips we wanted to take, and dream about where we'd be in 10 years. Friends would often say they admired our relationship. To them, Daniel and I were the couple that had it all. But when you live inside a marriage, you notice the tiny cracks no one else can see. At first, it was little things I brushed off. He started coming home late, always with some excuse about deadlines or client dinners. I believed him because I trusted him. Then there were the moments where he seemed glued to his phone, quickly locking the screen whenever I walked into the room. If I asked, he'd laugh and call me paranoid. I told myself he was just stressed with work, that maybe I was imagining things. But deep down, there was a quiet unease I couldn't shake. His hugs felt shorter, his kisses more distracted. Conversations that used to flow so easily between us started feeling forced. He was physically there, but his mind seemed somewhere else. I'd catch the faintest whiff of perfume on his shirt, not mine, something too floral, too sweet. When I mentioned it, he brushed it off, saying he'd hugged a client or stood too close to someone on the train. I wanted to believe him because the alternative was too painful. Nights grew longer with me lying awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering if I was losing him. I tried to push down my doubts, convincing myself that marriages go through phases, that this was just one of them. Still, the gnawing feeling that something was wrong refused to leave. I didn't know it then, but the truth was about to step out of the shadows and into my world in the most humiliating way possible. And when it did, everything I thought I knew about my husband and my marriage shattered in an instant. It started with small things I couldn't quite explain, but they stayed with me. One night I was looking over our joint bank account, something I usually did to keep track of bills, and I saw charges I didn't recognize. Expensive dinners at restaurants I'd never been to, hotel charges that didn't match up with his work trips, and random purchases that didn't seem like him. When I asked Daniel about it, he laughed like I was being silly. He told me it was all work-related, client dinners or hotel bookings his company reimbursed later. His tone was so casual, so confident, that I wondered if I was overthinking it. Still, I couldn't shake the unease. Then there was the smell. That same soft, floral perfume I'd caught before. It became more frequent, sometimes on his shirt collar, sometimes lingering on his jacket. It wasn't mine. When I brought it up, he rolled his eyes and said I was imagining it. "Do you really think I'd be that careless?" he asked with a smirk that made me feel small. He had a way of twisting things, so I ended up questioning myself. Whenever I pushed for answers, he'd flip it back on me. He'd ask why I was snooping through the account, why I was smelling his clothes like some jealous teenager. I'd feel embarrassed, even guilty, as though I had done something wrong by doubting him. He told me I was insecure, paranoid, maybe even a little crazy. He said I was stressing him out with all these baseless accusations. And because I loved him, because I wanted to believe him, I let those words sink in. I began to think maybe I really was overreacting. But no matter how much I tried to silence it, the feeling wouldn't go away. I started noticing his phone was always turned face down on the table. He carried it with him everywhere, even to the bathroom. If I asked who he was texting, he'd shrug and say it was work. He'd laugh and tell me I was jealous of his coworkers, which sounded ridiculous, but still made me feel ashamed for even asking. The more he brushed me off, the more distance grew between us. I'd sit across from him at dinner, watching him scroll on his phone while I ate in silence. I felt invisible in my own marriage. I wanted to scream, to demand he look me in the eye and tell me what was going on, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. I told myself marriages go through ups and downs. I told myself he was just stressed, and if I gave him space, he'd come back to me like he used to be. Inside, though, I felt lonelier than ever. There were nights I'd cry quietly, so he wouldn't hear me, clutching the pillow while he turned his back and fell asleep within minutes. I felt like I was living with a stranger, someone who no longer reached for me, who no longer asked how my day was, who no longer seemed to care. And yet I stayed. I held on to the memory of who we used to be, convincing myself that the man I fell in love with was still in there somewhere. I told myself if I just tried harder, if I just held on longer, he'd come back to me. But deep down, a quiet voice kept whispering that I was holding on to something that no longer existed. It was a regular afternoon at the office, the kind where everything felt routine. I was buried in emails, half listening to the chatter of my coworkers, when the air in the room suddenly shifted. The click of heels against the floor drew everyone's attention, and before I could even look up, I heard a voice I didn't recognize call my name. Standing in the middle of our open office was a young woman I had never seen before. She couldn't have been older than 27. Her hand rested on her swollen stomach, her pregnancy impossible to ignore. My coworkers all stopped what they were doing, their eyes bouncing between me and her. "Emily," she said loudly, her voice steady and proud. "I think you should know I'm having Daniel's baby." The words rang in my ears, heavy and sharp. For a moment, I thought I had misheard her. But the way my coworkers gasped, the way a few exchanged wide-eyed glances, told me I hadn't. My heart slammed in my chest. My hands shook beneath my desk. The room, the whole world, seemed to tilt. Jessica didn't stop there. She went on, her voice growing bolder with each word. She told the office how she and Daniel had been together, how he was the father of the child she was carrying, how they were building a future. Every word was like a blade cutting through me, and she made sure everyone heard. I could feel the eyes of my coworkers burning into me, waiting for me to react. Some looked away, uncomfortable, but others couldn't hide their curiosity. They were seeing my life unravel in real time. Shame rushed over me in waves, and for a moment, I thought I might break down right there. But I didn't. I swallowed hard, forced my face into something calm, and stood up. My knees trembled, but I locked them into place. I met Jessica's eyes and said, as evenly as I could, "This is not the place for this conversation. Please leave." She smirked, as if she had won something, and turned slowly, giving one last glance around the room before walking out. Her heels echoed until the door shut behind her, leaving behind a heavy silence that seemed to suffocate me. I could feel my coworkers staring, but I didn't give them what they were waiting for. I sat back down, pulled my chair close to my desk, and fixed my eyes on my screen. My hands shook so badly I could hardly type, but I kept my expression still. Inside, though, I was shattering. Humiliation burned through me, not just because of what she said, but because of where she said it. My workplace had always been the one place where I felt respected, where my voice carried weight. And now, in the span of minutes, I had been stripped bare in front of everyone I worked with. I didn't let them see the tears that threatened. I held them back with every ounce of strength I had. If I gave in, if I let myself fall apart there, then Jessica would have truly won. So I made a promise to myself in that moment. I would not be the broken one. This wasn't the end of me, no matter how much it hurt. She might have walked into my workplace thinking she had destroyed me, but what she didn't know was that she had lit a fire in me instead. That night, when I walked into the house, Daniel was sitting on the couch with the TV on, acting like it was any other evening. He looked up at me, smiled faintly, and asked how my day was. The question felt almost insulting, as if he had no idea what had just happened. My chest burned with the weight of everything Jessica had shouted in my office, but I kept my face steady. I dropped my bag, stood in front of him, and said quietly, "We need to talk." He frowned, muted the television, and leaned forward. "What's going on?" he asked, his voice too casual. I didn't bother circling around it. "Jessica came to my workplace today," I said flatly. "She made sure everyone in my office knew she's pregnant. She says you're the father." His face shifted instantly. First shock, then anger, but not the kind of anger that comes from guilt, more like anger that I knew. He shook his head quickly. "She's lying, Emily. She's trying to stir up drama. You can't actually believe her." I crossed my arms. "She was in front of my entire office, Daniel. She knew details about you. Do you really want me to believe this was some random woman trying to ruin us?" He stood, running a hand through his hair, pacing the living room. "I don't know why she'd say that," he muttered. "She's obsessed with me. She's twisting things. Please don't fall for it." I watched him, silent, until he finally glanced at me. Then I said, "Stop. I smelled her perfume on you. I saw the charges on our account. You've been lying for a long time. So either tell me the truth, or I walk out right now and never come back." He froze, his mouth half open. The denial slipped from him like water through his hand. He sat back down heavily, covered his face with his hands, and after a long pause whispered, "It's true." The air in the room grew heavy. My heart pounded so hard it hurt. "How long?" I asked, my voice sharp. He didn't look at me. "A little over a year," he admitted. It just happened. I never meant for it to go this far." My stomach turned. A year. More than 12 months of nights in our bed, smiling at me, holding me, all while giving himself to someone else. My skin crawled as if his touch was still on me, and I couldn't scrub it off. "And the baby?" I forced out. He lifted his head then, desperate, eyes wide. "That was an accident. I swear, Emily, I didn't want that. It doesn't mean anything. She doesn't mean anything. You're my wife. You're the one I love. I was stupid, I was weak, but it's always been you." The words hit me like ash. Useless. Empty. He wanted me to believe a year of betrayal was a mistake, that a child growing inside another woman could somehow mean nothing. My heart felt like glass shattering inside my chest, but my face hardened. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I looked at him and realized the man in front of me wasn't the one I married. He was a stranger who had been lying in my bed for months, kissing me with the same mouth he used to whisper to her. Something inside me shifted then. The part of me that had been clinging, begging for scraps of the man I thought he was, it died. I went cold, my voice flat as I said, "You've destroyed everything, and you'll regret it." He reached for me, trying to take my hand, but I stepped back. I wasn't broken. Not anymore. I was already planning what came next. The next morning, I woke up before Daniel and stared at him while he slept beside me. His face looked peaceful, like nothing had changed, as if the night before had never happened. A year of lies sat between us, and yet he slept like a man without a care in the world. I knew then that if I wanted to come out of this stronger, I couldn't let him see my anger anymore. I had to be calm, patient, and careful. When he finally woke up and looked at me with those guilty eyes, I softened my voice and said I needed time. I told him I wasn't sure what I wanted yet, but I didn't want to throw our marriage away overnight. Relief spread across his face so quickly it almost made me laugh. He hugged me tightly, whispering promises about changing, about fixing things. He believed me. That was my first victory. From that point on, I became an actress in my own home. I smiled when he came in late, nodded when he told me stories about work, and even sat beside him at dinner like we were slowly healing. He thought he had bought himself forgiveness. What he didn't know was that every smile, every gentle word, was another mask I put on while I planned my next move. When he wasn't around, I started digging. I went through the bank records again, this time with sharper eyes. Every dinner, every hotel, every suspicious charge. I wrote it all down, collected copies, and kept them in a hidden folder at work where he couldn't find them. I went through his phone when he left it charging, snapping pictures of his texts and emails with her. The messages were disgusting, him making promises to her, telling her things he hadn't said to me in years. Each photo I took was proof, another nail in the coffin of his lies. I didn't stop there. I reached out to a friend of mine, Sarah, who happened to be a lawyer. I asked if we could meet for coffee, and over that quiet table, I told her everything. She didn't judge me, didn't pity me. She just laid out my rights like clear stepping stones. What the evidence could do for me in court, what I could claim, how I could protect myself. Every word gave me power I hadn't felt in months. I walked away from that meeting with a clear plan. I wasn't just going to leave Daniel. I was going to take away the fantasy he and Jessica thought they were building. They wanted to embarrass me, humiliate me, strip me of dignity. Instead, I would be the one pulling the strings, leaving them with nothing but the mess they created. At home, I acted softer than ever. I told Daniel I was trying, that I wanted to believe in him again. He bought flowers, cooked dinner, tried to prove himself. He didn't realize every move he made only made him easier to predict. He was blind, thinking he had won me back. But behind every kind smile I gave him, I was sharpening the knife of truth. Quietly, carefully, I was building the story that would tear his world apart. I slipped into a role that felt almost unnatural at first, but soon it became second nature. In front of Daniel, I was the forgiving wife. I cooked his favorite meals, set the table like I used to, and even laughed at his weak jokes. When he came home from work, I greeted him with a smile, pretending the weight between us had lifted. He relaxed around me, believing the worst had passed. He had no idea that every warm glance I gave him was a mask hiding my coldest thoughts. At family gatherings and dinners with friends, I leaned into the act even more. I held his hand, leaned against his shoulder, and joined in when people complimented us for being such a strong couple. The more convincing I became, the more certain he was that he had saved the marriage. What he didn't know was that the more secure he felt, the easier it became for me to collect what I needed. Behind closed doors, I kept working on my case. Every receipt I found, every late-night charge, every text I could capture, I stored away. I logged dates, times, even details of where he claimed to be versus where he actually was. The pile of evidence grew until it felt like I was holding his entire secret life in my hands. But I knew I needed more, and I knew exactly where to get it. I reached out to Jessica. I sent her a message, carefully worded, asking if we could meet. I told her I wanted to speak woman to woman, that I needed to hear the truth from her. It didn't take long before she agreed, almost eager. When we sat across from each other, she looked smug, her hand resting on her belly as if it were a crown she wore proudly. She wasted no time. She leaned in, speaking with confidence, telling me how Daniel had promised her a future. She said he told her he was only staying with me temporarily, that once the baby came, we'd be over for good. I listened, nodding as if I were broken, but inside, every word was fuel. Her arrogance worked in my favor. She bragged about their trips, the gifts he had given her, even the way he had spoken about leaving me. I didn't stop her. I encouraged her, pretending to be the wounded wife desperate for answers. By the end of the conversation, I had more than enough. I walked away with details that fit perfectly into the case I was building, pieces Daniel himself would never have admitted. Jessica thought she had crushed me, thought she had proved she was the one Daniel really loved. What she didn't realize was that all she had done was hand me the weapon I needed to finish what I had started. Jessica didn't stay in the shadows for long. Once she realized I wasn't throwing Daniel out of the house, she grew bold. She started showing up in places she knew we might be together, restaurants, grocery stores, even once outside our own home. She acted like she belonged, like she was waiting for him to claim her openly. It didn't take long before she began pressing harder. Daniel's phone buzzed constantly with her calls and messages, and I could see the frustration building in him. He would step outside to argue with her in the driveway, his voice rising, but no matter how harsh his words, she kept pushing. She wanted him to make a choice, and she wanted it soon. The pressure began to wear him down. At first, he tried to play peacemaker, telling me to be patient, telling her to wait. But patience wasn't in her nature. She wanted to be the center of his world, and she wanted everyone to see it. The more she demanded, the more short-tempered he became at home. One evening, he came home late again. I had dinner waiting, the act of a supportive wife still in place, but he slammed his keys on the counter and snapped. "Do you have to sit there staring at me like that?" His anger was sudden, sharp, and unprovoked. I stayed calm, asking what was wrong, but he threw his hands up. "You don't get it. You don't know what it's like being pulled in two directions." His words were bitter, and for the first time he stopped pretending he was the victim of circumstance. He blamed me for the tension, as if my silence and patience were somehow adding to his stress. "If you weren't so cold, maybe she wouldn't be pushing me so hard," he muttered, not even realizing how twisted that sounded. I looked at him then, really looked at him, and felt the last thread snap inside me. Neither of them deserved me. Neither the man who betrayed me nor the woman who thought she had won some prize by carrying his child. They had created their own chaos, and now they were drowning in it. I refused to sink with them. That night, after he fell asleep on the couch, I sat at the dining table with my folder of evidence spread out in front of me. Every receipt, every message, every smug word Jessica had given me. I studied them like puzzle pieces falling into place. I knew then exactly how and when I would strike. Jessica's baby shower was coming up soon. She had made sure I knew about it, bragging that Daniel was going to attend and support her publicly. She thought it was her victory lap, her chance to shine as the woman who had taken my husband. She wanted the world to see her triumph. I decided that would be the moment everything turned. The perfect time to reveal the truth, not just to her, but to everyone who had been watching this circus. It would be public, undeniable, and devastating. She thought the baby shower would be her celebration, but instead it would become her humiliation. As I gathered the papers back into the folder, a calm settled over me. The waiting, the pretending, the endless act. I was almost at the end of it. Soon, they would see exactly what I had been preparing for all along. The day of Jessica's baby shower arrived, and I walked into the decorated hall with my head held high. Balloons and flowers filled the room, and laughter floated through the air. Jessica was glowing, not from motherhood, but from arrogance. She spotted me immediately and smiled, a smug little curve of her lips, as if she had already won. She wanted me there to witness her victory. Guests surrounded her, showering her with compliments and gifts. Daniel stood awkwardly nearby, trying to look supportive, though his eyes darted nervously when he saw me walk in. I greeted people politely, ignoring the whispers. My heart was steady. I had prepared for this moment. When the time came for speeches, Jessica made sure she was the center of attention. She thanked everyone for coming, gushed about Daniel being by her side, and even threw a pointed glance at me. The crowd laughed and clapped, and that was when I stepped forward. "Actually," I said, my voice cutting through the noise, "I think there are a few things everyone here should know." The room fell quiet. Dozens of eyes turned toward me, some confused, others curious. I reached into my bag and pulled out a folder. My hands didn't shake. I had rehearsed this in my mind too many times to count. "For over a year," I began, "Daniel has been living a double life. He's been lying to me, his wife, while sneaking around with Jessica. And while she may think that means she has his full commitment, the truth is far uglier." Gasps rippled through the room. Jessica's confident smile faltered. I opened the folder and held up copies of bank statements. "Here are the hotel bills, the dinners, the money spent on her while he told me we couldn't afford certain things at home." I set them on the table for everyone to see. Then I pulled out the printed text messages, highlighted for clarity. Here are his words to her, promising her a future. And here, I added, flipping to another page, are his words to me, swearing she was nothing but a mistake. The room was frozen. Guests stared, mouths open, unable to process the mess unraveling. Jessica's face turned pale, her hand gripping her belly as if it could shield her. Finally, I walked up to her and placed the folder in her lap. "Read them carefully. He never planned to leave me. You were never his future. You were just his side piece." Her eyes filled with tears as she scanned the pages, her bravado collapsing. Murmurs spread among the guests, some whispering in disbelief, others shaking their heads. Daniel couldn't take it. His face red, he muttered something under his breath and stormed out, shoving past people as he went. The door slammed behind him, leaving an echo of shame in his wake. I stood there a moment longer, calm and collected, before turning toward the stunned crowd. Without another word, I walked out, leaving Jessica crumbling in front of the very people she had hoped would celebrate her triumph. The morning after the baby shower, I woke up with a strange calmness. For the first time in months, I didn't feel like I was carrying a weight on my chest. The decision had already been made in my heart long ago, but now it was time to make it official. I gathered the folder of evidence I had carefully built over weeks, the receipts, the screenshots, the statements, and took it straight to my lawyer friend, Sarah. She looked through everything quietly, her face unreadable until she closed the folder and gave me a small nod. "Emily," she said firmly, "this is more than enough. He won't be able to fight you on this. You're in a strong position." So I filed for divorce. Signing the papers felt surreal. My hand trembled slightly as the pen moved across the page, but underneath the nerves was a quiet sense of freedom. This wasn't just ending a marriage. This was me reclaiming my life. When Daniel was served with the divorce papers, he looked like someone had punched him in the stomach. He showed up at the house that night, his voice shaking as he called my name. I stood in the doorway, blocking him from coming inside. "Emily, please," he begged. "We can work this out. I made a mistake, but I love you. I'll fix everything, just don't do this." His words no longer touched me. Once they would have shattered me, but now they felt empty. I looked at him, my voice cold. "You had a year to think about what you were doing. You had a chance to choose me every single day, and you didn't. It's too late." He reached for my hand, but I pulled it back. Watching his face crumble should have hurt, but all I felt was relief. For once, I wasn't the one begging. The divorce process moved quickly because the evidence was so clear. His affair, the financial records, the messages, it all worked in my favor. In the end, I kept the house, the car, and a significant share of our savings. He couldn't argue. He had destroyed the marriage with his own hands, and now he had to face the cost. Meanwhile, Jessica's glow seemed to fade. People who had once admired her confidence now looked at her with pity or disdain after the baby shower. She was left to face the reality of raising a child with a man who wasn't stepping up. Daniel didn't move in with her, didn't hold her hand like she had imagined. He was too busy wallowing in his own shame and anger at what he had lost. I'd hear whispers from mutual friends about how miserable he was, how Jessica cried when she realized she wasn't getting the fairy tale ending she expected. But I didn't involve myself. It wasn't my problem anymore. Sitting in my house, the house that was now fully mine, I felt a strange mix inside me. There was grief, of course. I had lost the man I once believed in, the marriage I had given my heart to. But alongside the sadness was something stronger, triumph. Not the shallow kind that comes from revenge, but the deeper kind that comes from justice. They thought they had taken everything from me. Instead, I had walked away with my head high, with my dignity intact, and with the life they tried to break still firmly in my hand. After the divorce was final, the quiet in my house felt different. It wasn't the silence of loneliness anymore. It was peace. There were no late-night arguments, no suspicious glances at his phone, no perfume lingering on his shirts. For the first time in a long while, I could breathe without wondering what lies were hiding in the air around me. I won't pretend it was easy. Some nights, I lay awake remembering the years I gave to Daniel, the trust one had placed in him, and how carelessly he threw it away. Those memories still stung. Betrayal leaves scars, and I knew mine would never fully fade. But scars are proof of survival, and every time I looked at what I had rebuilt, I reminded myself that I hadn't been destroyed. I knew I would never forgive him. Forgiveness would mean excusing what he did, and there was nothing excusable about the way he lived two lives while lying in my bed. I would never forgive Jessica either. She carried herself like she had won some great prize, but in the end, she was just another piece in his web of lies. They both wanted me to be the broken one, but I refused to give them that satisfaction. What I found instead was freedom. My life was no longer tied to his choices, no longer dependent on his moods or his betrayals. I could decide where I wanted to go, who I wanted to be, and how I wanted to live. I started focusing on myself in a way I hadn't in years. Small things brought me joy. Quiet mornings with coffee on my porch, long walks where I didn't have to answer to anyone, evenings where the house felt like mine alone. I wasn't chasing some fairy tale ending, and I didn't need a new love story to prove my worth. What I needed was exactly what I had found myself. Stronger, sharper, no longer blind to the games people play. Daniel thought he had broken me. Jessica thought she had replaced me. But in the end, neither of them won. I stood in the ruins of what they tried to build and realized they had only cleared the path for me to start over on my own terms. I didn't walk away with bitterness. but I did walk away with truth. And truth was enough. It was stronger than the lies they spun, stronger than the humiliation they tried to put me through. It was mine, and it set me free. He thought he broke me. She thought she replaced me. Instead, I took everything they tried to destroy and turned it into the life I deserved. If you were the one in Emily's place, would you have walked away like she did, or tried to handle it another way? I'm really interested to hear what you would have done, so drop your thoughts below. And if you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to stick around and hit that subscribe button so you can catch the next one.